Hi everyone, good afternoon. Joined today by Francois Guay, the founder and chief executive officer of the Canadian Cybersecurity Network, which is Canada's largest cybersecurity community with over 45,000 members. Under Francois' leadership, CCN has become the country's go-to hub for collaboration, innovation, and trusted insights, and connecting professionals, entrepreneurs, and change makers across every corner of the cybersecurity landscape. Francois, it's my pleasure to have you as part of the Pathfinders Network Cyber Awareness Conversation Series. At the Pathfinders Network, our DNA is built on advocacy, leadership, mentorship, and capacity development. And we believe in human-centric cybersecurity because true resilience starts with people, not with policy. And our focus is to discuss cybersecurity, personal, building everyday resilience through cyber awareness and habits. Francois, given the CCN incredible reach, you have a unique view of how everyday awareness, community connection, and leadership mindset shape resilience in the real world. And I want to start with the basics. From your experience leading such a large community across the breadth of Canada, what is the common mistake that you think people make online without even realizing it?
Thank you so much, Raphael, and thank you for everything you've done in the community, helping individuals and businesses be more connected to what's actually going on. I think one of the things that is the most common mistake out there, and I see it every day, and I see it not only in the general population, our children, our parents, our spouses, but also in the cybersecurity community, and that's oversharing online. So one of the things that, we have a tendency to do is share about ourselves, share about our lives and our accomplishments. We also share sometimes about our birthdays or our milestones. And you can be sure that the criminals out there are paying attention and they can harvest all this information. Especially now, Raphael, with all the AI tools that are out there, the information is available. If it's posted online, if it's on the social networks, including pictures. Sometimes we're including family members or even people that work with us in the office. These are all great things because we're trying to connect with people. We're trying to share accomplishments. But sometimes just that oversharing of certain information, a person's birthday or a person's name that's part of your family, or maybe even now a location in the background that can be identified. They can see where you are on holidays. They can see you're on holidays, so your home is, unprotected. Or maybe they see someone that they want to create harm to. So I think the oversharing, especially as we go into this, this crazy age of AI, is becoming wild because what people are sharing with ChatGPT or other tools could create some very, very huge cybersecurity risks. And I think it's so important to share to others in our family and the network that we have, not to overshare. We all share. I do as well, but I try to keep the personal details out of it. And I try to just talk about the accomplishments or what's going on in the community without trying to leave too much of a digital footprint for the criminals to follow.
Yeah, great. And you've spoken so well. And my follow-up question would have been, when and how do we know when we are oversharing? And I think you touched on that. Anything that is personal, like location, your personal details, birthday, and stuff like that. That's so good. And I think sometimes people are under the pressure or impression of, if they do not share, maybe people tends to forget that they exist. So there are a lot of pressure on people to just keep sharing and keep writing and keep sharing information about themselves. When mistakes happen, and they do happen, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And what matters most is how we respond. In your view, after a security slip or a scam, how can leaders or individual turns incident into an opportunity to strengthen culture rather than to blame individuals?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And we've seen it, I think, get better than it was a couple of years ago where people and companies did not talk about this. I think it's honesty, speed, and empathy. We
Mm,
need people to forgive mistakes, but, we won't forgive silence, right? So if people are honest and upfront, we're all going to have challenges, right? I think, probably yourself and we've all had some challenges around security at some point in our life. You get too happy, you get, click happy or whatever, even in your personal life because you're excited about something. You got to control those emotions. So I think being honest, being forthright, if you're a business about, a breach and how you're going to approach it, don't wait. People's lives matters. People's information matters. So I think being honest and telling them, being transparent, timely is really, really critical. Admit the issue, outline what's being done to fix it, right? How are you going to fix it? And showing that you'll prevent it in the future so that you can build that trust. And this is challenging because I think every organization out there has gone through sometimes challenges. We've seen quite a bit, the Ontario school system as an example, that happened recently. The hospitals, again, in Ontario. We've seen it with government as well, where we're not getting a lot of really good information about what's happening to our privacy information. If it was a CRA or if it was the RCMP being hit with information hits. I think being very honest about what took place, why it took place, and what they're going to do about it is going to make us feel more comfortable. And then on top of that, I think we need a framework. Reason we've seen change happen over the last few years, because if we remember the colonial breach in the US, that was kind of one of the first big ones. And they didn't really share a lot of that information initially, and it really came out later. Legislation, right? So government establishing some level of legislation where you have to disclose these things very, very quickly, or there could be penalties. But then also being somewhat lenient on organizations that are honest and upfront. Because if it's a big hammer all the time, hitting organizations, they're not going to want to say anything. They're
mm,
going to want to hide it.
mm,
So I think being very honest up front, but also being lenient,
mm.
government and policies being lenient to some extent, right? If it wasn't unintentional or it was a breach that they couldn't have handled either way, either because of funding issues or whatever else, there needs to be a balance out there around those things.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I agree with you. You mentioned a couple of things like showing empathy, showing humanity. Speed is very important when breaches do occur, being honest, being upfront, encouraging disclosure. You don't just by framework mandate disclosure, but by balancing, the penalty that comes with treating the organization that, okay, we know, yeah, this do happen, but by showing the humanity side of things, I think it's going to help people. Thanks so much for that. You've always championed the idea that cybersecurity isn't just a tech issue, that it's a life skill. And I want to just get your opinion. Why should everyone, not just those in IT or those in cybersecurity or information security, those in accounting, those in construction, those in other aspects, other discipline, why should they care about cybersecurity in their daily lives?
Well, Raphael, you like me know that technology, cybersecurity is pretty much a part of everything we do now. Every digital device, every digital service is tied to cybersecurity. If it's tied to our information, if it's tied to what we're doing, it's tied to it. We recently did a national report on healthcare that we just issued out in Montreal a few weeks ago. And one of the things we were talking about, the biggest risk in healthcare is just human error. And the challenge now is just like doctors and nurses and staff wash their hands to do surgery. It's super important now for them to think about it, cybersecurity as part of that process. Everything they do, every device that's out there could potentially impact the services that are being offered nationally, could also potentially impact someone's life, right? Because hospitals are the number one target out there. So I think that Cybersecurity, just like financial literacy for children, is part of what we need to teach. That's why I'm always been one of the biggest supporters of programs like Cyber Titans and Cyber SI. One teaches high school kids about cybersecurity. One teaches, kind of accelerates cybersecurity in universities and colleges. But we need more than that. We need cybersecurity now to be a part of daily learning in school, because all our kids are using devices. Our parents are using devices and may not be cyber aware. So I think there are some major, major challenges with the speed that things are changing. And then you add AI, and you're just in this critical, where everything could go wrong. AI is a wonderful tool, but it can also lead people astray by putting too much information online or creating huge security gaps in the programs and the technology that they're putting out there. So every click, every tap, every transaction carries risk. If it's in your home, or if it's in your business, or if it's in someone else's business, I think that, we need to figure out a way to teach people about cybersecurity.
And I agree. We have tech as been a component of almost everything that we do. And technology is also, maybe you want to talk about business, is a business enabler, right? So,
Right.
and using that proliferation of digital assets or digital equipment everywhere you turn to. So I perfectly agree that we should find a way to incorporate teaching, learning about cybersecurity, learning about staying secure into whatever we do, right from the home front, because that is how and when we will be able to drive the message home. And human error will continue to remain the top of the cyber issues that we have. Finally, the community is a huge part of the Canadian Cybersecurity Network, part of what you stand for. From your perspective, how can communities build a mindset of shared safety where everyone feels responsible for protecting one another?
Yeah, I think this is a really important subject because, one of the things we need to start doing, Raphael, is we need to start talking more openly about the cyber incidents without shame or blame. And, if we talk about it, then people learn. And, part of the challenge is that, I've seen it because I've seen communities out there that, and individuals out there that blame an organization or a company, or, put a lot of responsibility on the individual that might have created an error. And sure, sometimes we do have a responsibility. We have a responsibility as business people, as leaders, take every safety and security precaution out there. But there are also going to be mistakes. And when there are mistakes, I think this attacking gene that's out there needs to be reduced. It needs to be about conversation and discussion about how we can help. How can we help the individuals or the company that was breached? And how can we educate, around these breaches, around some of the challenges? Because not every company has the money to be as secure as, the large companies that are out there. When you think about a small business that might be in retail or might be, in the food industry, they don't have the resources, or they don't even have the mindset today to protect the data and the systems that they have in their business. So how can we be more receptive to them? How can we help them? How do we not ignore those small businesses and medium-sized businesses because they don't have the funding? There's this rush by enterprise, to help the big businesses because there's money, right? But what about the smaller companies out there that are being challenged and are, easy targets for, the threats that are out there? So I think as a community, we're going to be stronger when we're social, and we're stronger together. So when we share what's going on, when we learn from each other, and we support the smaller businesses, not just the big ones where the money is, I think that's going to help us a lot. So shared safety starts with conversations. That's the way I kind of put it. And when you see it's a collective responsibility versus, kind of I'm holding all the individual burden myself, I'm responsible, I'm going to get my head chopped off, then I think that takes away some of the pressure, and awareness will grow and the confidence will grow, and people will talk about these things versus just being quiet and, being really afraid that something may happen, and that they may have to take responsibility for it. So there's a huge stress. It needs to be reduced by the community.
Yeah, yeah. You see, when you mentioned these small businesses, kind of you struck a chord in me because it has always been something that I think about, that they drive the economy. They are least secured because they do not even, like you mentioned, they may not have the mindset, they may not even have the budget to provide security for their digital assets. And we do better as a community when we talk about it, when we start the conversation, when we offer to help. I think that will go a long way. I know you are bilingual. So before I round this up, so I just want to ask, do you have any message in other language aside of English, just to tell people more about cybersecurity awareness?
Merci, Raphaël. Je pense que c'est super important qu'on travaille en tant que communauté, qu'on travaille en collaboration. Je crois que c'est ça qui manque au Canada. On a une tendance à travailler en tant que province, ou on a tendance à travailler en tant que une ville ou un village, communauté spécifique. Mais pour moi, où ce que je vois les plus gros changements arriver pour la cybersécurité dans les prochaines années, non seulement entreprises, mais pour notre pays en tant que Canada, c'est de travailler ensemble au Canada et travailler avec d'autres organisations et d'autres pays au travers du monde pour accélérer les connaissances. Donc, pour moi, une communauté, oui, on est une communauté au Canada, mais c'est aussi une communauté au travers du monde avec ceux qui protègent l'information au travers du Canada. Oui, pour moi, c'est ça, c'est collaborer, communiquer ensemble, travailler ensemble sans avoir peur qu'on va un peu plus loin qu'on devrait. Il faut qu'on ait confiance, il faut qu'on ait un esprit d'aventure.
Thank you so much, Francois. Thanks so much for sharing your insight. Thank you so much for continuing to lead one of the most trusted cybersecurity communities in Canada. The Canadian Cybersecurity Network truly reflects the spirit of collaboration, shared learning that drives the resilience across all our industry. It has been a real pleasure having you as part of the Pathfinders Network Cyber Awareness Series. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Raphael. I really appreciated it.